Sing, sing a song.
Sing a song.
Sesame Street's Bob McGrath on this edition of Pop Goes the Culture.
Sing out.
You don't get to take your head off or take your hand off, or you go out, you're still going to be Bob no matter what.
I never cross at a red light if there's a kid around.
Yeah.
Because, they'll, Bob, the lights. The only time it's been very handy to be recognized occasionally, this is when we still lived in Manhattan more than now. I'd go through a stop sign that I hadn't seen or do some infraction of driving, which I drive hard and fast. And a policeman would come up, and this is one that I got off the Harlem River Drive a little over 123rd or something, and I went through a stop sign I didn't see. Bang, cop was right there. So I handed my driver's license, and he said, "Is your name really Robert Emmett?" I have to inject, Robert Emmett is a famous Irish patriot, and this guy was very Irish. I said, "Yeah." He said, "Is it okay if I borrow this and show my buddy in the car?" I said, "Yeah."
That's why you're famous, yeah.
So he brought it back, and he gave it, and he said, "Get the hell out of here." So that's happened half a dozen times, or many more times.
Wow.
Whether they're Irish or not.
It's a clue for those of you who are going to have kids. Name your kid Robert Emmett.
Exactly. Especially if you live in New York.
That's right.
And one of my very
Please, I like that.
One more. I was doing a club date in New Jersey, down in the Atlantic City, while I was still doing this Sesame Street. And I'm coming home in a sort of an old BMW that I'm driving hard and fast. It's 10 years old, but it still ran quick. Like 2 a.m, not one person on the turnpike, I thought. So I'm beating along at 90, 95 or something, right? Because it drove like it was going 50. Out of the bushes, state trooper pulls me over, doesn't even look. He's like 6'1", like Smokey the Bear with the hat and the whole thing. Driver light on. So he stuck his arm in without looking at anything, and then he's looking at it, and he said, he's looking in, and he looked at me, and he said, "You're Bob." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You're Bob in Sesame Street." I said, "Right." And I'm thinking, thank you, Lord, I think I'm getting lucky here. At which point he said, "I grew up in Sesame Street." And I said, "Oh, that's great." And he said,
"Can you count to 95?
He pulled out his ticket and book, and he said, "Something else, Bob?" I said, "What?" He said, "I learned how to write on Sesame Street."
Oh, God.
Handed me the ticket. Well, I wanted to crack up because, I didn't want to get, he gave me a real break. He cut the speed way down, but I still had to pay the fine, which I deserved.
Yeah.
And then he said, "I can't wait to get back to the barracks to tell the guys who I just met." I said, "Well, give them my best." I wanted to say Officer Krupke, but I didn't do that.
Officer Krupke.
So it's been,
that's so
it's been
funny.
Wonderful.
You've had some fun encounters with little kids also, besides the teeth.
Yeah,
teeth one.
A lot of them. I don't know how many I can rember.
I like the one we were talking about earlier about outside at home.
Oh, at home, yeah. My youngest daughter was about 4-ish or so, and the show was on, and I was home, but I was signing off. Today's show has been brought to you courtesy of that, and I say goodnight, see you on Sesame Street or something. And I came. This is 2 different ones, so that I'll combine these two. So I came home one day, and I was on. And I said, "Hi, Kathleen." And she was sitting on the couch, and she looked at me. She did about 4 double takes with the camera, wondering, "Oh, this is the first time she's seen me here and live." And she just turned around, jumped up in the back of the couch, and flew into my arms. And she beat me on the chest and said, "That's my daddy, that's my daddy." I said, "Really?" So then I shut off, and I go outside moments later to do something out the front. Our little neighbor, 2 doors up, comes down on his scooter like he did on a hill every time. And he comes down, and he's scooting along. He sees me coming out the door, and he comes to a screeching halt, and he looks at me and he said, "Boy, are you fast." And I said, "Yeah." I just left there, got home, came out the door.
Anybody ever ask you where Sesame Street was?
Lots of times. And, a lot of them, I got asked that tons and tons of times. But they want to know, how do you get to Sesame Street? And a lot of kids think that Sesame Street only exists, at least they used to, maybe there's more sophisticated now, in their own television set. And if they were going to move, they weren't going to see it anymore, which was kind of interesting.
Oh.
So,
I wonder what would happen if you put it on a GPS.
On a GPS?
If you typed Sesame Street into the GPS, I wonder if it would take you to like
123 Sesame Street?
123 Sesame Street.
I'm going
to have to try that.
Yeah, I've never tried that one. I may try that. But just somebody, I mean, I was in Vancouver just a couple of weeks ago and do the telethons out there, the Variety Club telethon. And I was in the pool. No, I wasn't in the pool. I was in the elevator. And this family came in with a little boy about 5-ish, and they were all dripping wet. And I was being smarty pants. So I said, "You went swimming?" And he said, "Yep." I said, "Was the water wet?" Thinking. He said, "Yep, I peed in it." At which point his parents went, "Oh no!" But
well, the answer made it just a little wetter.
A little wetter. A friend of my daughter had someone over in Hackensack, and they were buying shoes at that good shoe store. And so the little kid said, "Can I wear my shoes home, my new shoes?" And she said, "Yes, but you have to take the old ones along for play." He said, "Okay." So they got half a block down, they paid for the whole thing, got a half block away, and she said, "Where are your shoes? Where are your shoes?" And he said, "Follow me." So he took her back into the store, and while she was paying, he took his old shoes and made way on the counter with all the new shoes, put them in there, right between the others, and then he started singing, "One of these things is not like the other. Can you tell which one doesn't belong?" I've got hundreds of those kinds of stories. Isn't that wonderful?
Oh my gosh. So what was your favorite song?
Song?
On Sesame Street.
I guess I did tons of them, but I guess Sing would have to identify being Sing a song that Joe Raposo wrote. And everybody in the world, I mean, it's become an international hit song that the Carpenters, Karen Carpenter did. But it touches such a nerve in their bodies. I mean, I do it 2 choruses. I sing the first, and I invite everybody to sing along the second. And
you always cry?
Huh?
And you always cry?
I don't always cry. They always cry. I mean, after you've done it a number of times, you learn to stop crying. But that was a very touching song. And the other one, which I didn't sing, this was a Kermit song, It's Not That Easy Being Green, but I put it's such a great song, I put it in my concert. And until I heard Ray Charles sing it on The Tonight Show one time, I didn't truly understand what that song was all about. After that, I started looking out in the audience, and you look around, remember down at Disney, we'd gone there 2 or 3 years in a row out at Epcot outside with the symphony orchestra from colleges. And you'd look and see all people of color just nodding, saying, "Yep, that's what that's all about, baby."
Yeah.
It's one of the most beautiful songs ever written to discuss that whole, it's great.
And
it's being green is what I want to be.
And, I mean, look, Shrek, the Hulk, Kermit, there's a lot of green characters out there.
Oh, absolutely.
Wicked Witch of the West,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just... they're all over the place these days, and they're all the same shade of green, I think.
Are they?
They're pretty similar, yeah.
But
anything with, you had great stories about each of the Muppets. Let's talk about some of your human companions. The Muppets probably had their own clique, so you guys hung out with you hung out with the humans.
Well, you have to be very passionate about the early years. The 4 of us that started, and including Carol Spinney, who's become a very, very good lifelong friend, who does both Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch.
Right.
And we've been very, very close for 45 years. And he's been very close, and we didn't really know the cast being in the studio for that whole first season. We heard there was sort of good feedback coming back that a lot of inner city folks were saying this really worked. Mm-hmm. What we started doing about 5 or 6 tours around the country to all the major cities with large inner city populations. One of the first ones was in Los Angeles, and a big park. We had 2,000 or 3,000 kids out there, and Matt Robinson, who came from the Cosby Show, is a writer and very, very bright, very street, very hip, and very smart. And he went out to sort of tease the show a little bit, and every time he mentioned Big Bird, half the kids had their big bird and it looked like this. He came back and he had a wicked sense of humor. He said, wow, that's out there. He said, like 2 or 3 times, it's like a mini Woodstock. He said, every time I mentioned Big Bird, they all put their things up like it was a Jimi Hendrix LP, right? And he said, I'm going to go out and say, kids, there's some bad gum going around. If you have to, just do half a stick.
Do not do the brown. Do not do the brown gum.
Yeah, so we were killing ourselves laughing by the time 10 minutes later when we were on stage, and there was, and the reception we got there, and in Jackson, Mississippi, and in Chicago with Jesse Jackson in a huge theater that sat, 2,500, big movie theater, but they had 2 kids in every seat, so we had 5,000.
Wow.
And the response that we got, and we did the show with Jesse, and it was just incredibly heartwarming to see what the show was, the impact. That was the first time we really knew that, well, we're onto something really, really terrific here. And it's reaching our dead target audience, core audience of kids of color, of inner city. And
that had to be tremendously.
It was tremendously rewarding. Here's a preamble to the Jesse Jackson, Chicago. The day before, we were invited by, I think I can tell this, we were invited by the Nixon White House to come down and do a show for Pat Nixon, for all of her, some of her children that were involved with the embassy and so forth. And we were not a really big Nixon fan as a group. So we kind of said, but they said, we'd really like you to do it. We're still at this point getting, funding from the government along with Ford and Carnegie and so forth. And so we sort of reluctantly said, okay. Well, we had to be up at 4, got like a 6 o'clock flight down to Washington in terrible wintry weather, and went through the whole thing of getting in and so forth. Then we had about an hour and a half, 2-hour rehearsal on this room, one of the beautiful rooms. And finally our guy leading the group said to the staff person, who was rather officious, he said, well, we're finished our rehearsal. We need to have some lunch before the show at noon. And she kind of looked through the clipboard and said, oh, I don't see anything on schedule for food. And we thought she was going to say, just kidding, follow me. No. So she said, but I guess we could send out for some hamburgers or something, White Castle hamburgers, I think it was. And we thought she was going to be kidding. We said, she said, because there's nothing in the house. We're in the bloody White House.
There's
so
nothing
they did that.
in the house.
Nothing in the house.
White Castle, White House. Got it. Okay.
Right, got it. So we had some tired white hot dogs or cheeseburgers, something or other.
Well, no wonder stuff happened with Nixon. He was hungry all the time.
Yeah, right. Nothing in the house and mumble on.
There's said nothing to eat. I mean, that can mess your blood sugar, and just the next thing you know, you're tapping phones and you're paranoid.
So we're all lined up. We're not an easy group to miss. Just before we're to where we could enter into this room, and Pat comes through, and I think the bird was standing there along with all the cast, the whole cast, and kind of walked right through like an inspector general and didn't look left or right and say, thanks very much for getting up and being here for me.
So charming, the Nixons.
Yeah, and so, but Oscar was already pre-set in his trash can out there. And we were peeking through the crack of the door. She sat in the first row, and Oscar has a wonderful, wicked sense of humor at times. Carol Spinney as Oscar. He's the kindest, gentlest, most wonderful person in the world, but he has another side when he's doing Oscar.
Well, puppets are great alter egos.
Yeah, exactly. So between Big Bird and Oscar, you can't get a bigger, chain of it. So we were watching, and at one point he decided to go off script a little bit. He just was mumbling, kind of setting up things, and he says, this is just prior to the tapes. He said, wow, I found some really great trash in the basement. And we're looking, and Pat goes, like this. And he doesn't go into that, of course, but...
Oh, that's hilarious.
So then we come and do our show. And for the kids, we'll do anything for kids. We'd never shortchange, a child 3 seconds. At the end, she wanted to get a great setup of the cast and the bird and for Life magazine. And we said, bloody not, you know. That's the last thing. We'll do this, but we're not doing it. And so every time they were ready to pick it up, one of us wandered off. I got to go to the bathroom, and this went on and on for the four of us.
Oh my gosh!
And she never did get to the full. She got a picture with Big Bird because he was there. She was captured. Then we had to fly right from there to Chicago to Jesse Jackson. We flew out, got some sleep, had a rehearsal in this theater the next morning for an hour. And he said, "You guys must be hungry." We said, "Yeah, we are." Especially after work.
Yeah.
So he said, "Follow me." We went outside, walked 2 doors, went up some very, very long wooden stairs to a hall that was set up for us and some other people with more incredible soul food than you could ever eat.
That's awesome.
Cast for an army. And we're sitting there having this incredibly delicious soul food. And we looked around and we said, something's wrong in the state of Denmark, boys and girls. Here we are, nothing in the house. And here we are in the middle of inner city poverty with a setup that would make you die for.
Want another piece of pumpkin bread?
Yes.